Jennifer, you're welcome. I'm excited to do this as well. Pensacola. Hi, Sylvie. Thanks for joining us. Okay, we're at the top of the hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit record, and I'm going to do a quick intro, and then off we go. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Our webinar is 5 Reasons Your Job Interviews Aren't Converting to Offers with alumna Meridith Dennes. My name is Lucy Sandell, and I'm with the Northwestern Alumni Association. Before we leap into this great content, let's go over a few housekeeping rules for today's presentation. So you all know you can use the chat. We've been using it pretty well here. Yep, I'm French Canadian, Sylvie. That's right. So we can use the chat, and if you want to stick to the Q&A tab for your questions, that would be great. Although I do have my colleague Kat, no relation to the Wildcats, joining us today, and she'll be monitoring the Q&A. And we'll be saving time at the end for your questions. So please send them in as they come to you, and we'll answer as many as we can before the end. If you experience any technical difficulties, I want you to contact support@bigmarker.com. And if you forget that email address, no problem, just type it in, or type in your issue, and we'll get right on it. Lastly, a link to the recording will go out to all registrants tomorrow. Usually it's 2 business days, but since 2 business days is Monday, I don't want to make you wait that long. So you'll get it tomorrow. And now let me give you a little bit of information about our presenter today. Meridith Dennes is currently Chief Operating Officer, Managing Director of Harrison Rush, a global financial search firm that specializes in recruiting investment bankers and private equity professionals. Meridith also leads Harrison Rush's efforts in diversity and inclusion, where she provides strategic advice, counsel, and delivers customized solutions for senior management teams on diversity-related issues. So now I'd like to hand it over to Meridith before we get into our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. So just by way of introduction, as Lucy mentioned, I'm currently the COO of Harrison Rush. I focus on lateral recruiting, which means people who have at least 1+ year of investment banking or private equity experience. Prior to Harrison Rush, I founded a technology company, and the name of which is Project Eve. We reached 17 million women monthly, where we focused on career transitions, work-life balance issues across 6 digital properties. And prior to Project Eve, I worked in investment banking post-MBA for 15 years. I started at Bear Stearns in mergers and acquisitions. I worked at Bank of America Securities in leveraged finance and acquisition finance. I then worked at a couple of different places before I ran structured debt globally for Sumitomo. So I've kind of sat in a lot of different chairs. I've been a career switcher. And so it's a pleasure to speak with Lucy about this issue of having a brutal time when you're actually trying to land a job offer. Doing all of that. So I'm thrilled to be here and see if I can help someone or many people today.
Thanks again, Meridith. So let's launch into some questions that I had. So you want to be prepared when you're coming to an interview. And if you do an internet search, you'll find over 200 million results, including top 10 questions asked in an interview or 30 best tips. What's the number one mistake you see folks making when they prepare for an interview?
So, I think that the biggest thing and the biggest red flag for me is when a candidate sounds too scripted and uptight. So I've literally interviewed hundreds of candidates for roles in investment banking. And some of the worst interviews were when a candidate provides kind of canned, one size fits all generic answers. I think, people, when they interview you, want to know you. They want to know that you're a nice, normal, intelligent, well-spoken person. And giving these automated, monotone, robotic answers that don't even really answer the interview question has always been a non-starter for me. You come off kind of uncomfortable and not natural at best, and then at worst you just come off generally weird and wrong. This is not to say don't prep for an interview, but there's better ways to prep as opposed to kind of memorizing your story, and just kind of jamming a one size fits all answer into the question that's asked. And it's hard now because, especially with COVID, depending on your situation, you may be masked, so it's very difficult to read verbal cues. So you have to be, like you're just looking at people's eyes, and so it's even worse when you're going like that, and you're like, oh, I wonder if this is at all working. But really look for the nonverbal cues, be natural, answer calmly, and make sure that the interviewer looks engaged, interested in what you're saying. They may be, even if I'm going like this and they're nodding, that's a good sign, that they're picking up what you're putting down. But just, weird, overly scripted, don't do that.
Okay, so sounding overly scripted or robotic is a definite no-no. Great.
No.
How do we go about answering a question that you've heard perhaps even in a previous interview with the same company? Like, how do you keep it fresh?
So I think you keep it fresh by being natural. I mean, people ask you, and you have conversations every day with people, and they ask you the same question. How's your day going, or whatnot. You have different responses to different people. You don't say the exact same thing to every single person you meet. And so, you look at the person, you smile, you get the vibe of the room. And it's always been very hard in investment banking because there's something called a super day. So you could have like 5 interviews in a row, and at a certain point, you're like, did I say that? I don't remember if I said that to you or I said that to the guy before you, but, do your best, and try and be, try and think about what you're saying, be mindful about what you're saying. And, as I said, read verbal cues. And if they don't seem interested, then you've got to pivot and try and find something else. You can even, talk about, this is challenging. I've spoken to, 5 people today, and I don't even know what I'm, if I've answered this before. So everybody knows it's challenging. So just be self-aware and be humble and do your best.
Sure. That's a good point, because I've certainly been in this situation where I've had interview after interview and there was no like,
It's awkward.
you didn't feel like the interviewers had spoken to each other, like, this is what I'm going to cover or anything like that. And then I hear the same question, like, tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. And yeah, so like you said, treat it as if you were in a regular conversation where you wouldn't answer robotically to every single person that you see in a particular day. So
right. And there's things that you may have forgotten with one interviewer that you may remember with another, and, try and remember what you said. Or, what I would also say is after each interview, just take a minute and debrief, have like a debrief. What did I forget to say that I can bring up in the next interview? What did what answer can I run through in my mind that I could have answered better in the next interview? So take a minute and reassess what you've done in the last interview and think about how you can improve it in the next interview. Even if it's 5 minutes, that 5 minutes shouldn't be, whew, that's done. It should be, I think that I answered, this question, but I forgot to mention this and this. So in the next interview, you could say, actually, I really am technical, and I am, I have, executed these 3 deals, and there's always something more that you can add. It can always be additive. You can always look back and reflect and be like, how can I improve on what I did? Because there is no perfect answer.
Right. So treat it as an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Great. And before we go to the next question, I'm sure everybody is interested in your background. What's going on back there?
Oh my gosh. This is a prime example. So given the fact that it's work from home and COVID, life happens. And today was the day that the contractors actually showed up in my home to redo the floor. So I'm in my garage with my kayaks and my surfboards. And so we're pretty active in Vermont. We split our time between Vermont and Manhattan. And so what you're seeing is my very fancy garage with my kayaks and my surfboards. And this is what happens in life in this new normal.
Thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm. You just got to roll with it.
Absolutely.
We're rolling. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we've answered this. Don't be robotic, be natural. So I'm in the interview, and I know I'm not going to be robotic when I answer the questions. I'll be engaging and engaged. How can I'm interested in the role without sliding into overly enthusiastic? If I'm a person who tends to use exclamation marks in my speech, or lacking confidence that I can be successful if I tend to be quiet. If I'm a quiet person, how do I show that I'm so confident about the role?
Okay. So, I think no matter how terrific you look on paper, or how well you can nail a case study, you will never get past the first round if you are weird and awkward. And weird and awkward typically falls into 2 camps. Overly enthusiastic people who come across like, hummingbirds on crack, or super low energy, timid people who lack energy and enthusiasm for the role. And so, I think the people that work at the firm think it's pretty awesome. You need not tell them how awesome their firm is. They know. You can also convey your interest in the firm by through research that you've done on the firm. There's other ways to convey your enthusiasm without being kind of overly in your face about it. It's hard when you're timid. That's always challenging there, but also, I think they want you to speak up. So they want you to be more, what are you going to contribute to the team? So think of it when you go into an interview situation, this is a team situation. So how am I going to contribute to this team from a personality standpoint, from a cultural fit standpoint? I don't think you want to be an outlier in any way. And they want to see how, you're going to fit with the rest of the group. How are you going to work together? What's your work style? And so they get that from an interview. It's not just technicals that they care about. When I was working in investment banking, I at times would pull double all-nighters. So when you're spending 40 hours with your colleagues, straight. Yes, some of it is on technicals, but a lot of it is on what do you want for dinner, and can you crack a joke, and can you lighten the situation? How do you handle things under pressure? So being off is off-putting to people. You don't want to make your interviewer feel uncomfortable. So successful candidates are engaged and interview the employer as well. If you're interviewing, come with a list of questions that you've prepared, complete with follow-up questions, but don't rapid fire ask a bunch of questions and make the interviewer feel uncomfortable. So I've been in situations they're like, and this, and this, and let me ask you this, and how do I do this? And I'm like, okay. So I don't know, and maybe you should do this. And so it's just, 2 or 3 questions, great. 6 or 7, 8 questions, weird. No questions, weird. So somewhere, be reasonable. That's all. And never make the interviewer feel uncomfortable. Don't argue with the interviewer. Yeah.
Yeah. So most of us can sense discomfort when someone else is behaving in a way that doesn't match the situation. But a lot of us have blind spots about our own behavior. How do we work to notice this in ourselves?
So I think the best way to notice so what we typically do is you'll do a 360-degree review, and I recommend doing this for any time you're interviewing. Are you getting interviews? 1, 2, are you making it past HR? Are you falling down in the first round, the second round, the third round? Where are you falling down, and which types of questions in which area? And that's where you need to course correct. So if you make it through the first interview or let's say you make it to HR, that means your resume is pretty good. So don't focus on your resume. But if you keep getting dinged from HR, then there's something in those soft qualitative questions that you are messing up on. And so at that point, you need to go back, reassess, maybe take some bullet points, look at the higher view interview questions that are standard, that are out there, jot some bullets down, practice a little bit, potentially reach out, speak to friends, family. We offer, that type of counseling as well. But that's really important that you course correct. So you need to identify where the problem is, and then you need to fix it. So if you have a blind spot, nobody can come in and say, okay, this is exactly what you're doing wrong. You first need to kind of break down the process, find out where, it's like a leak in piping. Where's the leak coming from? And then you need to plug it so the water can keep flowing forward.
Okay, cool. So we've gone over 2 of the 5 reasons. We've gone over you sound too scripted and uptight. 2, you're overly enthusiastic, super timid, or super weird. Let's go on to number 3.
This is my favorite.
Yeah. Okay. You may think that the interviewer or interviewers know that you're interested in the role by the end of the interview because you thanked them for their time and you thought about sending them a thank you note. Is it still necessary? What should it contain?
So a lot of people have asked me, is it really important? Is the thank you note really important? And I think the thank you note is incredibly important. Not only, so first off, you should send a brief thank you note within 24 hours of your interview. The thank you note does not have to be handwritten in snail mail. But, a quick email, 3 or 4 sentences is really important to send and follow up. You thank the interviewer for their time. You convey your interest in the company by referencing something the interviewer said about your chat. And then you reiterate your interest in the role. And so, when you have a conversation with somebody, every time, because I live in Vermont and my daughters are competitive alpine ski racers, skiing often comes up when if I see it on a resume under interests. So I would expect somebody, you know, in a thank you note to me to reference something, hey, wishing you a great snow season, you know, this year. Just something that references something personal about that we spoke about, and then also reiterating their interest in the role, reiterating not all of the qualifications, but perhaps, you know, I really believe given my experience in X and Y, I would be, you know, a suitable fit for this opportunity. So I think that's incredibly important. Don't overthink it. Once again, you do not want to write a dissertation. It does not have to be 4 paragraphs. Nobody wants to read 4 paragraphs, but a quick, you know, acknowledgement of, hey, you took your time to talk to me and I appreciated that.
Yeah. So what happens? You get home from the interview and you're psyched. You think, oh, I did so great.
Mm.
Then a couple of days pass and you think, oh, I forgot to send the thank you note. Is it still worthwhile? Should you still do it?
Mm-hmm. You should. I mean, it's better to send it within 24 hours, but still, you know, think of it this way. It's still a nice thing to thank somebody for their time. You know, it's a gracious thing to do. If somebody took you to lunch, you would thank them. You know, you wouldn't just let it go. And I think it is important to send a quick note. I typically will go it depends. So, like for a job interview, you send a note. If you talk to a recruiter, you do not send a note. So, but I do think that even if you miss that 24-hour window, it is a nice thing to do. So, yes,
Okay.
still send the
Can
note.
you talk to that? You don't send a note to the recruiter if you spoke to them?
Sure. So, you know, basically, I speak to my. So I, instead of having scheduled calls, I typically will hand out my number to a number of people looking to potentially make a move. My calls with them are relatively brief. They're maybe, you know, 5 to 10 minutes. I don't spend an extensive amount of time going through every deal on the resume, because I can kind of tell. Um, I always say, what are you looking for, as opposed to me pitching one job. Like right now, I have 148 open jobs. And so at all levels, between, you know, from analyst all the way up to MD. And I think, you know, one of the most important things is I want to hear what the person wants to do, what their next move should be, at which point we'll, you know, we typically have a conversation about a couple of potential open roles. I ask them to think on it. They shoot over their resume if they haven't already. We go back and forth a couple of times. You know, if it is a thank you note, it's pretty much, you know, thanks for the chat. Like that's all I expect, or, you know, or nothing. It's like, yes, of course, and we just move into kind of a working relationship. So the reason why I say with recruiters is we're either going to have a dynamic, iterative relationship where I'm going to work with them to help place them, or they're waiting until, you know, bonus comes, or, you know, another 6 months of their existing role, at which point, you know, they'll say, or not say, hey, I'll be in touch. But I have so many of these on a daily basis. I never judge anyone for not sending me a quick thank you note, because I could talk to 15 people in a day.
Yeah. Well, thanks for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
Other people may be different. This is just me, where I'm like, you know, it's great if you want to send me a quick note, but if you don't, it's no harm, no foul. Just for recruiters, it just doesn't.
Gotcha. Okay. So that was number 3. Reason number 3, not following up. This next one is a personal favorite of mine. Some interviewees think, well, my resume got me in the door. We'll focus on that during the interview and I'll show how my background matches the needs of the job.
Mm.
If this is me, what big mistake have I made?
Mm. So many mistakes. So me, me. So I think the first thing I would say is not preparing for an individual interview and not understanding it. There's a couple levels of preparation. Number one, I always ask people to go back and reread the job description for the role that they are interviewing for. Okay. Your resume has gotten you in. That does not mean they want to hire you without talking to you first. So the first thing is you need to understand what job is that, what the job is that you're going in to interview for. One of my favorite interview questions is, tell me a little bit about your understanding of the role you are interviewing for. Many people seem to fall down on that. And that's even just like a generic question. That's not even specific to the company. So if you can't even tell me the job you're interviewing for and what the role is, which is pretty much a regurgitation of the job description, that's a red flag for me. The second thing is if you come into the interview totally blind, so let's say you even know the job, but you come in totally blind, it's you might as well not show up for the interview at all. It's a complete rookie mistake. You need to research the company and the position in advance of the interview. You need to prepare your qualitative answers. You need to review your technicals. You need to conduct mock interviews. If you know nothing about the company, I don't care if you've been in investment banking before, you should know the role you're interviewing for. You should know what differentiates the company that you're interviewing at from other companies, who the major competition is, what deals they've done or transactions they've done, what their strategic vision is, where are they in the market. There's many things that you can do to prepare for the interview. But one thing for sure is you're going to get, why are you looking to move? And why do you want to work here? And why do you want to work here cannot be, I don't want to work there. Okay. I don't want to work there is a very bad answer to why you want to work here. You need to be specific about why you want to work here. And if and that is, go on Google, do a news run, figure out, read about the company. So much information is on their websites. Typically they find out new hires, find out, they have company presentations you can review. Really prepare for your interview. That also means understanding your own resume. So you're like, great, me, and my resume, and I'm going to talk about me. Well, unfortunately, sometimes people really go into great detail in the resume discussion. So they will go line by line on your resume. So if you don't know exactly everything on your resume and they start digging in on a specific bullet and you don't have an answer, that's even more problematic because you don't know an answer to something on your own resume. So I think a couple of things. One, know yourself. So make sure you understand and read your resume and can answer any question on your resume. Okay. Because if it's on your resume, it's fair game. Two, which means if you put on, I am an avid reader, do not be surprised if somebody says, great, what's your favorite book? If you say, I play Texas Hold'em, then somebody can ask you about that. Avid traveler, where have you traveled? And those are just the general interest types of questions. If you can't come up with a book after you put on avid reader, that falls into the general weird category. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is, as you research the position. So you think you know the position. Every bank is structured differently. Every role, every company is structured differently. You may have a similar position, but it may be slightly nuanced at this company. So, do your best to interview, to prep beforehand, to read the job description, to understand the structure of the firm. If you don't, these are great questions that you can ask the interviewer to be like, I was doing some research and I'm really interested to understand how your leverage finance team is integrated with your sponsor finance team. Are they one and the same? I noticed you brought over Christina Smith to head, Lev Fin from RBC. Is she building, like, these are all real questions that you're allowed to ask the firm or the interviewer that A, show that you've done some research, and B, show that you're interested and engaged in that particular firm. Lastly, I would say, so the first thing is research. Make sure you understand your own resume bullet by bullet and can answer anything on there. Make sure you research the position in specific. It may be different from your existing position. And three, make sure you really, really research the firm, know the nuances, understand that people, new hires, new strategic initiatives, whatever it is, it's really important that you spend the time doing it. It's almost more important than your technicals, to just figure out, like, and there's ways that you can do that. You can also do it by conducting mock interviews on yourself. I like to hold up my phone, record myself, and say I'm answering this question now, set the timer for 2 minutes, and all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, look, I've blown through 7.5 minutes talking about, something that is meaningless. So do mock interviews, do it in the mirror, do it on your phone, record it, be like, ooh, yuck, that's weird. So, stuff like that, it really helps. So,
Yeah. What about for people? Now, I know that your background is finance, venture capital, that sort of thing. What about for people who are applying for roles in companies that don't have as much visibility, let's say, on the internet, where they,
like private companies
have to have that information? So, like a smaller company or a boutique company, what would you recommend other than going to the company's website or link to get more information to prepare?
So I think there's especially with a smaller company, you have to ask yourself, why did I apply to this company? So understanding the size of the company, having a good reason that, there's not a lot of information out on the company, but there must have been a reason that drew you to the company. So I really like, being honest about it. I'm really interested in working for a smaller company with a flat hierarchical structure where I can really be a contributor day one. I don't really like being a large cog in the wheel. It seems like this opportunity, I get to wear a lot of different hats. I really am interested in that. So, once again, read the job description, and then you can interpolate from there. Okay, this is how I can spin this to make this seem interesting to me. Like, so I like working at smaller companies because I play a more active role in the decision making, and so there's other things that you can do, that as opposed to like large corporate things, but you could say, okay, this is why I'm interested in working at this small company, this is why I'm interested in working at small companies in general. And you can ask about corporate culture, you can ask about strategic initiatives, you can ask things like that. Those are wonderful questions. Hey, I did some research online and I found a lot out about your competitors, but not as much out on you. Maybe you can kind of give me a little bit of a lay of the land. Like, even just saying you tried to research, I like saying, or researching the industry that the company is in, having
Right.
that general, like, there's a lot of different ways that you can show effort. I think people just want effort to be shown. Like, I gave this some thought, as opposed to just pressing apply on LinkedIn and now you called me and I'm like, hey, you called me. Yeah, that's not going to work.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's the fourth. That's the
Mm.
fourth reason you're knocking yourself out. That's no preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it a mistake to ask for accommodations before you get the offer? Shouldn't they want to know the needs?
No, because no. So you need to get the job before you start asking for stuff. So asking for it's, guaranteed salary, flexible work options. The interview, the interview is not the time to bring this up. Typically, if there are flexible work arrangements, they're either mentioned once again in the job description, or if you're working with a recruiter, the recruiter can kind of give you some more color on what's what the culture is amenable to versus not. And so there's definitely kinder, gentler cultures. There's cultures that are more flexible with work from home arrangements and options. But you really don't want to start negotiating an offer that you don't have. And you definitely don't want to start negotiating until you have the offer in writing. So, for example, I have two offers out this week, and one came in verbally or via email, and it was like it talked about deferred comp, and the gentleman who has the offer was like, I think we need to talk about deferred comp right now, and I was like, I think we need to read the letter and understand what that is. Okay, that's what I think. I think we need to, before we fly off the handle, I have no idea what this means to this company. I know what it means in other companies, and it means different things in different companies. So let's just slow our roll, slow the roll, and read the letter. And then once we get the letter, we can see what we can and can't live with, because when we go in and negotiate, we may not want to negotiate piecemeal. We will probably have a multitude of points that we'll go in and negotiate for. So what can we live with? What can we not? And what can we give up on? It's a negotiation, and you really don't want to do that until you have something in writing. The only thing I would say on the subject of making demands is there's ways that you can allude to things that are important to you, that you don't have to make demands on. But for example, I was also working with a woman who didn't want to tell the employer that she had a young child, and the child was 2 years old. And I was like, now we're 8 interviews in, okay, and you have successfully avoided mentioning family in a natural situation, and a normal situation, when other people have mentioned that they have family. And when you talk about what you like to do on the weekends and such, you decided not to mention your family at all. All of that would be fine if then you don't. But now, once you have it in writing, you want to ask for accommodations because of your family. I think that is awkward. That goes into just being, it didn't have to be as awkward, because I think I understand that she didn't want to mention that she did have a child, but I'm always of the camp, I like to spend time with my daughters. I like to spend time with my husband. We like to go hiking together. Like, I'm very forthright in what I like to do, and family is important to me. And then at that point, it's fine to then mention the accommodation, but it's then not out of left field, and you can't worry about not getting a job offer because you mentioned you have children. That's probably not a good fit for you, right? If you're afraid to mention that you have children, that's a bad situation. So I don't think you really want to work there if you're worried that they're not going to give you an offer because you have a child. That's my thought.
Yeah. So that's the 5th one, making demands before you get the offer. We have a lot of questions out there.
Oh, good.
So yeah, I know. I'm excited.
Oh, I'm excited too. People stayed on the phone and on the webinar, even though I have kayaks and stuff. That's good.
People don't mind the kayaks. Caitlin asks, as a recruiter interviewer, what is a question you like to hear from a candidate? Alternatively, what question gives off a bad vibe?
So things that I like to hear from a candidate in terms of a question to me, when I speak with a candidate as a recruiter, I'd like to understand their true motivation for wanting to leave. I want to hear their story. The story has to make sense. And so if their story makes sense to me, if there's gaps in the resume, things need to be explained. A question that, let me think about a question that I like to hear. People don't ask me so many questions as a recruiter, but when I was a banker, one of the questions that I love to hear is why did you choose Bank of America? What makes, what made you decide to come to this firm? What do you enjoy most about your job? I think I always liked it when people ask me kind of about my experiences. I found that to be because it said they were listening to me, they're interested in what I'm going to say. That was really important. Things I don't like to hear, um I think I don't like it when people are super argumentative with me. That wasn't great as a recruiter or whatnot. So I've often had people, um, actually on occasion say things like, "Well, I'm like, well, you have no mergers and acquisitions experience," and they're like, "Well, that doesn't matter. Can't you just send me into bank A, B, and C?" And I'm like, "Well, no." And they're like, "But you have to." And I'm like, "No, I don't." Because that affects my credibility in dealing with the COOs of these companies. So I think I don't like it when people start to, I try and be helpful, but if people are kind of delusional in what they want and they keep pushing, 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 that makes me feel uncomfortable as a as an interviewer.
Sure. Thank you. Marina asks, how do you how to do best with initial weed out interviews with lower level personnel who aren't directly familiar with the role?
Oh,
I
yes.
guess this
You
is
gotta get
HR.
through, you gotta get through the screen. So part of there's a couple of ways that you can get through the screen, and the screen is really challenging. One of the best things about working with a recruiter is that we deal directly with the hiring manager. So for example, when I get I have 15 jobs from, Oppenheimer, Green Hill, or whatnot. They're typically with the MDs, and I know exactly what they're looking for. The issue is if you typically when you apply direct, you go directly to a junior level HR person who may or may not understand the nuances of the role. And then they'll interview you, and it's really easy for them to take the round peg and put it into the circle. So if you have anything that falls, not like outside, they don't know what to do. So the way to get around that, there's two ways. One, the recruiter is always kind of better to present you in because they understand that the slight nuances of, for example, of an industrials investment banker to a consumer investment banker. I can take A and put it in B and it would be fine. I can take healthcare tech and put it into healthcare, and I understand life science. Like, so I understand the nuances of the positions, and I understand, but sometimes it's really challenging with with the junior level personnel to do that. So how do we get around that? How do we get around that? You work with a recruiter, you network within the company. That's another way to get around that. So if you start to have pull from people within the group and you've networked, the referral always trumps the junior HR person. So, and you don't want to be dismissive of the junior HR person, but the referral will always trump the junior HR person. If you work with a recruiter, we bypass that screen.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Vanessa asks, what is the proper time follow-up after an interview?
24 hours. Within 24 hours. Just for a quick email, or are you talking like, so sometimes, so this is what she's really asking, I think. Sometimes you can get ghosted. Okay. So if it's 2 weeks out and you haven't heard anything, it's not happening. Okay. 2 weeks is the absolute, like, if you have heard nothing in 2 weeks, you are probably, I would say 95 to 99% not going to be getting the job. People also don't like to deliver bad news. So sometimes they just don't tell you anything. They don't even tell the recruiter anything. They just kind of put you in the maybe probably not pile until they hire somebody. And then they eventually hire somebody. And then they come back to you and say the position's been filled. So if you want to kind of, the initial thank you is 24 hours. I would then follow up once at 1 week and once at 2 weeks. And after that, it's over.
Gotcha.
Which is a little brutal to hear, but you know, it's also truthful.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody wants to. Yeah.
Larissa asks, in your opinion, is it appropriate to ask the interviewer to connect on LinkedIn?
No. No. I think your quick follow-up is great if you get hired, by all means, but why do you want to connect with the interviewer on LinkedIn? You know, I think that's part of it. I think it's really, really important. It seems a little stalkery to me more than anything else.
Gotcha.
So I just, it's one thing to connect with the recruiter. Absolutely connect with the recruiter. Connect and network prior to your interviewer or your interview. If you want to send a quick thank you note via LinkedIn and connect, you can do that as well. So that's the one way I would say, okay, yeah, connect. So like, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. I found the interview thoroughly informative and enjoyable. I really enjoyed getting to know you a bit better and loved hearing about how much you enjoyed skiing and, you know, whatever. But I think you've got to be very, very careful to not look stalkery.
Yeah. That's a great point.
I mean, it's a fine line. So
Right.
I would say no.
Yeah. David was an early candidate to interview for a position. The interview process is getting extended as they ensure I'm the best person for the position from the recruiter. This is the recruiter saying that. Any suggestions to bring the attention back to me to ensure that I'm the best choice?
Okay. So they want to see some other people. Is that the issue?
It sounds like it.
Okay, David, if you had more things in the hopper, you wouldn't care so much about this job. The problem is you need to have many, many fish in the barrel when you're spearing the fish. So, you know, I think they could potentially come back to you, But given this job market, I think people are moving quickly. And so I think part of it is if they don't think it's an immediate good fit and they want to see other candidates. I have had this happen a couple of times. That's not a great sign for you. Like part of it is, okay, there's a reason why they may say that. So I typically get that if you're a second choice. So if they make an offer to one other person and then that person turns it down, they may make an offer to you. Or you may be a third choice, or they may be telling you to keep it warm, but you're definitely at this point, it's not how do we re-engage the client and let them know that I'm the first choice. At this point, it's, that's really the recruiter's job to do that. But I think if you had gotten that far, you'll get that far with somewhere else. It's a numbers game. So keep fighting the fight. You may wind up getting the gig, you may not, but there's nothing that you can do from your end.
So he must
You're like super brutal. You. I'm like having a brutal. I'm trying to be honest about what I see, which isn't necessarily what everybody I know wants to hear, but I'd rather be honest because the process is so opaque and so convoluted and people just don't get any feedback and then it's awful. So it's better to be realistic. And have a realistic conversation with the recruiter and be like, look, are they interviewing people from scratch?
Oops, you froze. Well, she is in her garage, so can everybody still hear me? Can somebody just type in, yes, you can still hear me? Oh, okay. Thanks. Oh, she popped out. So hopefully she'll be back because I think this is really timely and useful.
And go live. Screen off and my camera. Hi, I'm so sorry.
Hi, you're back.
Oh my gosh. I was like, this is the drama of Vermont where it's like, all of a sudden everything's good and then it's not good. So I apologize, everyone. I'm glad somebody wants to live in my garage. David. Okay, sorry guys. I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's no problem. We've all experienced this, right?
Oh, by the way, everybody on the webinar can LinkedIn friends with me. I do not find that stalkery. So if we don't get time to answer questions on the webinar, please shoot me a question on LinkedIn. And I'm really happy to help any way that I can because I don't know if we'll have time for everything, but I'm very LinkedIn friendly.
That's wonderful, Meredith, because we certainly won't have time.
No, and there's so many questions. And so I don't want people to be like, oh, she's gone forever. No, just LinkedIn with me because I don't think it's weird. But other people would think it's weird, but I don't think it's weird. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, everybody, when I reached out to Meredith, it was like, I think you're really cool. Would you like to speak to alumni and students? Basically it. And, she's great. Okay, so David's follow-up was, how much influence does the recruiter have in the decision process?
Ooh. Depends. Depends on the recruiter, depends on the position. So I've definitely I have certain clients that I work with really closely where I then say, hey, um, I steer them in one direction because I think it's going to be a better fit for them long term. So the recruiter doesn't have say. The recruiter actually, it really depends. It depends on the client and it depends on the recruiter. So I've definitely put in like, I think you guys got to talk to him now. And
Right.
then I also say, it's time to give her an offer because she's very close with other places. You're going to lose her. Other things like that. It really just depends who your relationship is with at the company. So recruiters can
Gotcha.
have a very, very, like I've also gotten weird vibes from people that I've worked with and then steered companies away, being like, I don't know, I'm getting some weird, I think you're going to dodge a bullet here.
Right. Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah.
If someone has held a part-time role for multiple years for
Mhm.
family reasons, when is the best time to discuss this, if at all, especially if there's an obvious gap in their resume?
Well, it's funny. I'm working with a gentleman who had to take 2 years off to care for an ailing father. And there's a couple of ways to address it. One, you be forthright. You're upfront about it. I left Lazard Frere because my father fell ill, and I had to go and figure out and help my mom and my dad, and figure out a family business or whatnot. You can address it in one sentence in a cover letter or an email. That's always good. This is where a recruiter also comes in play because you're like, oh, I was a primary caregiver. I left a full time job so I could be the primary caregiver and I'm trying to on ramp back in. There's certain firms that have on ramp programs right now. Goldman Sachs has an on ramp program. There's a lot of firms that have on ramp programs. So, I think talking it through to make sure, once again, the story makes sense. Not everybody has been at the same firm for 10 years and doesn't have, like, people have, stuff happens. Sometimes markets go up, you get laid off. Sometimes, you go part-time because you're a primary caregiver. Like, life happens and it's okay. You just have to own your story.
Yeah. And I think we have time for one last question, and I think it's highly appropriate because a recruiter, is how do you find a recruiter?
How do you find a recruiter? So the first thing I would do is take a look at what area you want to go into. So, for example, I work in investment banking, some private equity, corporate development. Um, I would do a Boolean search on LinkedIn. I would do, a Google search. I would look actually at LinkedIn job postings. Typically, the types of job postings, for I don't actually. This is probably not great for me because I'm lazy sometimes, but most recruiters actually post their jobs on LinkedIn to do some resume fishing. And so you can find recruiters who are present in the space that you want to go into, whether it's banking or tech or whatnot. You can look at Google and be like, okay, best recruiters in tech. You can look at the monster job boards and be like, okay, these guys specialize in this. I think it's you can I have people connect with me all the time on LinkedIn. I have almost 20,000 connections on LinkedIn because they're like, hey, I do this. And I'm like, okay, I specialize in this. And they're like, do you know anybody? And I'm like, well, and sometimes I have time to give some advice. Um, so it's tricky to find a recruiter, but it's good to find not just one recruiter, but multiple recruiters. And then you'll find one that you gel with. And some people you'll gel with, and some people are just, once again, you're just going to be like, ugh, no. And just because you don't like one recruiter doesn't mean you have to only work with that recruiter. Continue on and move on to somebody that you're like, okay, thank you for listening to me.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. And I apologize to everybody who had questions or who have questions who the questions weren't answered live. But as Meredith said, connect with her on LinkedIn and ask your question there. She's fabulous, as you know, having spent an hour with her today. I just want to say thank you so much, Meredith. You're my last webinar guest. Kat's going to be taking over in the new year program. I'll still be here. I'll still be here at Northwestern. So anyone can connect with me as well on LinkedIn. But I wanted to thank you so much. This has really been a tremendously useful program. I'm very grateful.
Oh, thanks again for having me. I really hope I meant it to be very helpful, and please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I will do my best to help. And for anybody who attended the webinar, I'm very happy to send over some interview prep materials that I've already created for other people if you think it's helpful.
That'd be great. Thanks so much.
Thanks again. Okay.
Take
Bye,
care.
guys.
Have a great rest of your day.
You
Bye.
too.